Have you ever tried counting the stars? It's impossible, right? There are just too many. Well, tonight's story is about a man named Abraham who tried to do just that, and about a promise from God that seemed just as impossible. Abraham and his wife Sarah were very old. They loved each other very much, but they had one great sadness in their lives. They had no children. They had waited for years and years, hoping and praying, but as they grew older, their hope began to fade. It just seemed like it was too late. One clear, beautiful night, God spoke to Abraham. He said, "Abraham, come outside." So Abraham walked out of his tent and looked up. The sky was a vast, dark blanket, sparkling with more stars than anyone could ever imagine. It was absolutely breathtaking. Then God said something amazing. "Look up at the sky, Abraham. Try to count the stars if you can. I promise you, your family, your descendants, will be just as numerous as all those stars you see." Imagine that. Abraham looked at the endless sea of stars, and then he thought about himself and Sarah. They were old, wrinkled, and gray. How could they possibly have a family as big as all the stars in the sky? Even the animals seemed to be listening in. The sleepy camels blinked their long eyelashes, and the fluffy sheep huddled together, their ears twitching as if they were trying to understand God's huge promise. It was a promise so big, it filled the entire night sky. Abraham stood there for a long time, just looking at the stars. At first, a little chuckle escaped his lips. Him, a father, and not just to one child, but to a family as big as the stars? It sounded like a funny joke. He thought about his creaky knees and Sarah's tired smile. God, he might have thought, that's impossible. We're way too old for that. It was a crazy, unbelievable idea. Everything in his life, everything he could see and feel, told him it couldn't happen. The idea was so wild it was almost funny. But then, as he stared into the twinkling expanse above, something shifted in Abraham's heart. This was God talking to him. The same God who created every single one of those stars. The God who made the mountains and the seas. And as he thought about that, a different feeling replaced his doubt. It was a tiny spark of faith. He took a deep breath of the cool night air and chose to believe. He didn't know how God would do it. He didn't have a plan. But he trusted that the one who made the stars could also keep his promises, no matter how impossible they seemed. He said yes to God in his heart. Well, time went on. A year passed, then another and another. Abraham and Sarah got even older. They still didn't have any children. I'm sure there were days when Abraham looked up at the sun and wondered if he had just imagined that conversation under the stars. Did God forget? Was it all just a dream? It's hard to keep believing when you don't see anything happening. One hot afternoon, as Abraham was resting by his tent, 3 visitors suddenly appeared. These weren't just any visitors. They were messengers from God, angels. Abraham, being a very hospitable man, rushed to welcome them. He brought them water to wash their dusty feet and told Sarah to quickly prepare a delicious meal for them. While they were eating, one of the angels asked, "Where is your wife, Sarah?" Abraham replied, "She's inside the tent." Then the angel made a startling announcement. "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Now, Sarah was inside the tent, listening to everything. When she heard this, she couldn't help it. She laughed. Not a happy laugh, but a quiet, "Yeah, right," kind of laugh to herself. She thought, "After I am old and my husband is old, shall I have this pleasure?" It sounded like the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. A baby? At her age? It was even funnier than Abraham thinking about it all those years ago. But the angel knew she had laughed. He asked Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I really have a child now that I am old?'" Then he said something very important, something for all of us to remember. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Sarah got scared and said, I didn't laugh. But the angel knew. He simply said, No, you did laugh. It wasn't an angry accusation, just a statement of fact. Sarah had laughed because God's promise seemed too good, too big, too impossible to be true. And sometimes we do that too, don't we? And then it happened. Just as the angel had said, about a year later, the impossible became possible. Sarah, who was 90 years old, gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. Abraham, who was 100 years old, was finally a father. The wait was over. God's promise had come true. The sound of laughter filled their tent once again. But this time, it wasn't the laughter of doubt. It was the pure, joyful laughter of happiness. Abraham and Sarah held their tiny son, and they laughed with delight. They named him Isaac, which actually means he laughs. Every time they said his name, it was a reminder of their own doubtful laughter, but more importantly, a reminder of God's faithfulness and the joy he had brought them. The whole camp celebrated. It was like a giant party. The sheep seemed to dance and leap in the fields. The birds sang extra cheerful songs. And even the old camels seemed to have a happy look in their eyes. Everyone and everything was filled with the joy that this miracle baby brought. The baby, Isaac, was a living, breathing, giggling symbol that God keeps his promises. So what does this ancient story about stars and laughter have to do with us today? It's a powerful reminder that God is in the business of doing the impossible. Maybe you have something in your life that feels impossible. Maybe it's a dream in your heart that seems too big, or a problem that seems too hard to solve. Maybe you've been waiting for a long, long time for a prayer to be answered, and you're starting to wonder if God has forgotten. Abraham and Sarah's story teaches us to hold on. It teaches us that our age, our situation, our feelings of doubt, none of that can stop God's plan. He is faithful. His promises might not happen on our timeline, but they will happen on His. The Bible tells us that all of God's promises find their yes in Jesus. That means that because of Jesus, we can be sure that God's goodness and faithfulness are for us right here, right now. Just like Abraham looked at the stars, we can look to God's word and trust what He says. His promises are like little lights of hope in the darkness. So tonight, as you get ready for bed, maybe take a peek outside at the stars. And as you do, remember Abraham. Remember that the God who created every single one of those stars knows you, loves you, and has incredible promises for your life too. Trust Him, even when it seems impossible. Believe in His promises, because with God, nothing is impossible. Good night, and sleep well. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more.